Welcome to Snail Story. Today's story begins in an airport hallway, where a quiet janitor unexpectedly walks into a million-dollar meeting and changes the course of her life. She had once been overlooked. Once stayed silent for 7 long years to protect her child. But then, a mistranslated line of glance at the right time opened a door she thought had been closed forever. This is a story about courage, about those who were once forced into silence, and a CEO who chose to stand up and make things right. Journey of healing, of voices buried too deep, and of love found in the simplest, most human things. If you enjoyed gentle, emotional stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can walk together through many more journeys here on Snail Story. O'Hare International Airport. 7:18 a.m. A storm in a gray suit entered the emergency meeting room, and the entire place fell silent. Is this a joke? Owen Mercer growled, waving a crumpled stack of papers high in the air. The CEO of Avalon Air, the largest airline freight carrier in North America, looked like a hurricane in search of someone to strike. "This is our most important contract of the quarter, and you let it land on my desk in Catalan?" "No one answered." A few executives glanced nervously at one another. Others lowered their heads as if the document might burst into flames. Owen tossed the papers onto the table. Pages scattered like a magician's failed trick. "I called for translation. Agencies, none of them would take it. They said it'll take at least 48 hours to get someone who can translate Catalan. Seriously. A billion-dollar company, and no one can handle the language of a Spanish province." Marcia, Owen's personal assistant, fumbled for an explanation. "Sir, this is a very specific dialect of Catalan. Very few people understand it well. Even machine translation gets the meaning wrong." Owen spun around, eyes narrowing with challenge. "Fine. Then here's the deal." He clapped his hands. "Once, I'll give my entire month's salary, $150,000, to anyone who can translate it right now. Full version, no Google Translate, no guessing. Who dares?" A frozen silence fell over the room. "Then I can do it." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't shake. Calm and certain, like someone reciting a breakfast menu. All heads turned toward the corner of the room where a woman in a light blue uniform was mopping the floor. She stepped out of the shadows. Her face lightly misted with sweat, dark hair neatly tied in a bun. Her plastic name tag read, "June D. Maintenance, you what?" Owen blinked, unable to mask his surprise. "Catalan." "I understand it. If you still want the translation," June said, her voice even and composed. A few chuckles rippled through the room. "The janitor's hallucinating," someone scoffed. "She probably thinks this is a movie." But June didn't flinch. She walked up to the table and gently picked up a few pages. "Excuse me." Owen crossed his arms, one eyebrow raised. "You want me to believe you, a janitor, understand Catalan? That's rarer than a unicorn." "I'm not asking you to believe me," June replied, reaching out her hand. "Just let me read." There was something in her eyes, neither arrogant nor meek, that made Owen hesitate. Then, with a mocking smirk, he handed her the papers. "Suit yourself. Let's see your magic trick." June scanned each line swiftly, her eyes moving as fluidly as if reading a bedtime novel. Within seconds, she looked up. "This is a transfer of ownership notice, along with the rights to use a cargo terminal at El Prat Airport in Barcelona. It's from Ms. Estela Rovira, vice president of the Inclau Shipping Company. She passed away last month. This document confirms Avalon Air as the sole inheritor of terminal access rights." The room went dead silent. Owen squinted. "What?" June continued. "The asset is valued at approximately 4.3 million euros. However, the deadline to accept the inheritance is today by 5 p.m. Madrid time." Marcia shot to her feet, glancing at her watch. "That's 1:12 p.m. over there. Owen snatched the phone off the table and called the U.S. Embassy in Spain. Urgent. I need to verify the validity of a Catalan document issued by Estela Rovera. As he began the call, June quietly stepped back toward her mop. She didn't need confirmation. She knew she was right. A few minutes later, Owen hung up. Eyes locked on June. Everything you said, word for word, even the deadline down to the minute. The room held its breath. Owen walked toward her. How do you know that language? June shrugged. I lived in Girona for 3 years. Owen stood still, speechless. Then he pulled out his checkbook, scribbled on a check, tore it off, and handed it to her. $150,000. I keep my word. June didn't even glance at the amount. I don't want extra. I'll take exactly what you promised. It's a subtle blow to Owen's pride. She wore no suit, held no title, didn't beg for favor, but she knew her worth. June folded the check, tucked it into her pocket. Thank you. I'll get back to work now. And she left the meeting room, leaving behind a millionaire CEO staring after her speechless. Stunned by a woman with a mop who had just turned his world upside down. Owen Mercer couldn't stop thinking about the janitor. That Friday, he sat in his 39th floor office, staring out at the aircraft parking bays beyond, his mind adrift like a plane waiting to land 40-8 hours earlier. A woman with a mop had saved his company from losing a €4 million cargo terminal deal, and she had only taken the $150,000 he'd offered in a burst of anger. A promise he'd never expected to actually fulfill. No demands, no bargaining, no over-the-top thank yous. Just a clear gaze, a steady voice, and a calm demeanor that made Owen feel defeated. What was her name again? Owen asked, without lifting his eyes from the laptop. June Delgado, Marcia replied promptly. Night shift, outsourced cleaning crew, started in 2021. Owen looked up. Any background? File, Marcia frowned. It's odd. Nothing clear before 2018. Then a long employment gap, followed by a string of temp jobs. Cleaning, babysitting, delivery services, no degrees, no translation experience. Marcia shook her head. None on record. Owen went quiet. Someone who could translate Catalan in minutes couldn't possibly have no language background. He tapped his fingers on the desk. Marcia, schedule a meeting with her. Send an official invitation from the executive office. I want to speak with her. That afternoon, June received the invitation to the CEO's office. She read it 3 times. No explanation, no context. Just a brief, formal message. Dear Ms. Delgado, the CEO of Avalon Air, Mr. Owen Mercer, would like to meet with you at 4 p.m. today in the executive office, 39th floor. Sincerely, Executive Secretary's office. June paused, then changed into a clean uniform, tied her hair a little neater, and stepped into the elevator just like any other day except today. She didn't stop on the 2nd floor. She rode straight up to the 39th, a place no janitor in uniform had ever set foot in. The glass doors opened to a room bathed in golden afternoon light. Owen stood by the window, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. Hello, Ms. Delgado. Just call me June. He nodded June. A few seconds of silence stretched between them. I still can't believe what happened the other day, Owen said with a faint smile, eyes still on the runway. You saved my company with just a mop and a razor-sharp mind. The mop had nothing to do with it, June replied. Owen turned back and chuckled. Fair enough. I have a proposal. No need to thank me. I just held you to your word. It's not a thank you, he said, pulling out a chair for her. It's a job offer. June raised an eyebrow, but didn't sit. We work with international clients all the time. I want to invite you to be a freelance interpreter We'll call when we need you. Pay will be per project. You already have a translation team. After Wednesday, I don't trust them anymore. June. Considered. What are the terms? You set them. I only ask one thing. When you translate, tell the truth. Like you did. She crossed her arms. No sugarcoating, no inflating the message. Just the truth. Owen confirmed. All right. $700 per session under 2 hours. $1,200 if it goes longer. Deal. June nodded. I'll need a quiet room, documents at least 2 hours in advance, and no one interrupts me while I'm translating. You have the right to request that. For the first time, June smiled. Not a polite smile, but one that was almost pleasant. Well then, she said, congratulations. You just rehired an old worker at a much higher rate. Worth every penny, Owen replied as she turned to leave. Owen asked one more question that made her pause. June, how many languages do you speak? She didn't turn back. She just said softly, 5. But one of them is silence. The door closed behind her, leaving Owen still standing. One hand on the desk with the unmistakable feeling that ... he had just stepped into a world of language. No one had ever taught him how to understand. 3 days later, the large conference room on the 10th floor of Avalon Air was unusually lively. On the big screen, the partner's name lit up. Maison du Ciel, a French aircraft parts distributor. A €3 million contract was on hold due to a strange reason. Avalon's official interpreter, James Doyle, couldn't clarify a crucial technical clause. I'd like to reaffirm, James stressed. The client is simply asking about the ISO certification. June, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, holding a note-taker, gently pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Not exactly, she said softly. The whole room turned to look. He's asking about 3 things: origin, traceability, and environmental standards, not just ISO. James frowned. I've been translating French for 15 years, Ms. Delgado. Then you know the phrase, law conformit, environmental, doesn't refer only to ISO. It includes planetary standards and product origin as well. A sudden silence fell. The French client on the screen smiled and nodded. Precisely. She got it perfectly. James flushed red. Logan, the VP of Operations, glanced at Owen, seated at the head of the table, raising an eyebrow as if to say, now that's the real expert. Throughout the meeting, June never interrupted or took over, but whenever a translation was vague or inaccurate, she calmly corrected it. No one could argue. Every word she used was measured, accurate enough to make the client nod in agreement repeatedly. After the meeting, James left without a word. The remaining interpreter, a young woman named Eliza, turned to June. Sorry about James. He's a little sensitive. June simply smiled as she packed up her notes. Eliza looked at her for a moment and asked, Where did you study? Paris. June shook her head lightly. That doesn't matter. What matters is that the client understood and was satisfied. Owen waited until the room emptied before approaching her. You did really well today, because I was paid. To do well, June replied without looking up. Are you always this practical? Always. Especially when you have a child who needs medicine on time. How old is your child? Owen asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. June paused. 7. And the father. She looked up and met his eyes. There is no father. Just me. For the first time, Owen had no response. Her answer carried no bitterness, no pity. Just a simple fact. She picked up her bag and turned to leave. June, he called. She looked back. Thank you for saving today's deal. No problem, she replied, then paused. Actually, there is one thing. Owen tilted his head. What's that? You promised $1,200 if the meeting went over 2 hours. It's now 2 hours and 11 minutes. Owen laughed. Send me the invoice. Already did, she said, then disappeared around the corner. Owen stood there for a moment, hands in pockets, a half-smile still lingering on his face. He'd never met anyone like her. Every word she spoke, every step she took, clear, grounded, without hesitation, and what surprised him most, while others tried to mask ignorance with confidence. She used actual knowledge to stay silent. Owen wasn't the kind of man who got obsessed easily. But ever since the meeting with the French partner, the name June Delgado had been stuck in his mind like an encrypted file waiting to be unlocked. How could a woman who spoke 5 languages, understood legal jargon, and fluently read international contracts be mopping floors at an airport? It didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. It didn't resemble anything Owen had ever known. On Tuesday afternoon, he called Marcia into his office. I want you to dig deeper into Ms. Delgado. Marcia hesitated. We've already run the standard background check, sir. I want to go further. Where did she study? What did she do before 2018? Why is there a 2-year gap in her records? I paused. Do you really want to know? Owen looked at her. Marcia, I trust you. But this time, search as if we were hiring a senior executive. Marcia exhaled and nodded. Give me 2 days. 2 days later, she placed a thick stack of documents on his desk. You're sure you want to read this? Owen nodded silently. The first page was a copy of a degree from Georgetown University, majoring in linguistics and international relations. Honors, summa cum laude. The next, a master's degree from the Monterey Institute of International Studies. Primary language, French. Secondary, Catalan and Japanese. Then came her professional. History, 2012 to 2015. U.S. Department of State International Interpreter Assistant. 2015 to 2018. United Nations Senior Language Specialist. Handled diplomatic sessions across Europe. Marcia pointed to a small line at the bottom. She served as an interpreter at the 2016 NATO summit. Owen said nothing, flipping the pages. This is the part you need to see, Marcia added, pulling out a separate folder. 2018 internal complaint filed. June Delgado reported a series of international contracts showing signs of money laundering and abuse of humanitarian aid funding. She was the whistleblower. Owen whispered. Yes. But after that, Marcia hesitated. Then opened the next page. 2018. Terminated from the United Nations for unprofessional conduct and breach of confidentiality. Fabricated? Owen almost growled. Possibly. But afterward, she disappeared from every public database. No jobs, no tax records, no official address registration. As if she deleted herself. Key. Owen leaned back in his chair. A woman who dared to challenge a global institution and paid the price by being erased from every system. Anything else? Only one address. She's been renting an apartment in the Pilsen neighborhood, the working-class area in the south of the city. She's lived there since 2019. Owen closed his eyes. Pilsen, far from glass towers, conference tables, can designer perfume. And that's where someone who once stood in the United Nations halls had chosen to start over. That evening, Owen drove to Pilsen. June's home was an aging 2-story apartment, with a peeling wooden balcony, a few potted plants, and a child's bike resting near the door. He didn't go in, just parked and watched from a distance. He saw June sitting on the front steps. Raphael curled up asleep in her lap. She wasn't. In a blue uniform? Just a mother in a soft sweater, loose hair, and eyes gazing into the distance. No mop. No plastic name tag. Owen sat in his car for 10 minutes, then quietly drove away. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not out of curiosity anymore, but because, for the first time, he truly wanted to understand, not just her story, but her silence. Saturday, 7 p.m. Owen Mercer sat alone at a table in Orem. It's a kind of restaurant where reservations were booked 3 months in advance. Candlelight, red wine, a soft hum of violins drifting through the air. Every detail was meticulously curated. He had sent the invitation the day before, June. I'd like to invite you to dinner, not as a thank you, but as a gesture of recognition. Not work, not favoritism. It's a meal between two people who once translated the same meeting. There was no reply, not until 7:14 p.m. The revolving door turned. June walked in. She wasn't wearing a fancy dress, no red lipstick, no glittering accessories. Just a simple black blouse, dark jeans, flats, and her hair pulled back neatly. But Owen nearly forgot how to breathe. She was still June, unadorned, quiet, steady, like a rock in the glitzy ocean of the restaurant. "Sorry, I'm late," she said, placing her bag on the chair. Parking was a nightmare. No worries. I'm really glad you came. It's just dinner, remember? Just dinner. Owen nodded. They sat. A waiter approached with menus. His eyes paused only on Owen, then skimmed past June, as if she were invisible. "What can I get you to drink, sir?" he asked. "Red wine," Owen answered. "And for the lady." The waiter hesitated. "Water, please." June said, "We also have imported sparkling water from Italy. Tap is fine." She cut in. The waiter pursed his lips and walked away. Owen looked at her. "You always throw people off balance." "Hey, B." "They never had balance to begin with," June replied, not sarcastically, just observant. Dinner flowed more easily than Owen expected. June told him about how she first learned French, borrowing Edith Piaf records from the public library. Owen shared how he ended up in a Japanese language class in college by accidentally signing up for the wrong course code. They laughed, not loudly, but the kind of laughter shared between people who understand the language of things left unsaid. Until an older woman walked past their table, whether by accident or intention. She brushed the tablecloth, making it fall slightly, then paused. "Oh dear, clumsy me." Her gaze swept over June, then turned to Owen with a half smile. "Is this your girlfriend?" Her outfit is very simple, unusual, but captivating in its own way. June smiled politely. "Thank you. Are you an actress, or maybe a catalog model?" "No." Oh, her voice elongated. "I see." She walked away, but Owen heard her whisper to her dinner companion. "Escort? Probably. You can tell by the way she holds herself. She's trying too hard to look classy." Owen stood up abruptly. His shoes clicked across the wooden floor until he reached the woman's table. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" The woman forced a smile. "I don't know what you mean." "You were implying that the woman I'm dining with is a prostitute." I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The tone, the glance, the disdain, it was loud enough. By now, every eye in the restaurant was on them. Let me make this very clear. She is not just the best interpreter I've ever worked with. She's the only person in a room full of men in suits who saved a multi-million-euro contract. She speaks 5 languages, and she carries more dignity than anyone I've ever met. The woman turned red, her eyes downcast. Owen returned to the table. June hadn't moved. Her hand rested on the napkin. Her gaze had dimmed. He sat back down, exhaled. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." She shook her head. "I'm used to it." "Well, I'm not. And I couldn't let it slide." She looked at him. There was something in her eyes, softer, almost. "Why?" Owen hesitated. "Because you don't deserve that." June looked at him for a long moment, then turned away. "I think we should end the dinner here." Wait, he didn't think, didn't calculate. He just leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek for 1 full second. The world paused, then dashed smack. The slap rang out as clearly as a gavel in a courtroom. June stood. "What did you just do?" I'm sorry. I just thought I was the kind of woman who'd forgive anything as long as I got to sit in a Michelin-starred restaurant. No, that's not it. Then what? A CEO thinking a janitor should be grateful to be taken to dinner and granted a kiss. June, I didn't mean to offend you. Just an impulse. A feeling? A display of entitled instinct. She laughed bitterly. I've heard it all before. She walked away, never looked back. Owen remained seated, his heart-tangled mouth dry. He'd tried to do the right thing and managed to ruin everything instead. June left nothing behind. No parting words. No backward glance. Only one thing stayed with him. Her face at that moment wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Avalon Air Headquarters, 35th floor, Monday. 9 a.m. A soundproof boardroom, lined with polished black. Leather chairs around a walnut table as long as a plain fuselage. 3 people sat inside. Raymond Shaw, Chief Financial Officer. Cynthia Blair, Head of Human Resources. Marcus Liu, Chief Operating Officer, Owen Mercer's right hand. We need to talk about her, Raymond began. June Delgado. Cynthia asked. The interpreter. The interpreter, and currently. The most unsettling person in this company, Raymond emphasized. She's not on any official organizational chart. Not full-time staff. No formal contract. Yet she shows up at high-level meetings, accesses internal information, and he hesitated. Possibly has a special relationship with the CEO. Marcus glanced at him. That's speculation. What about the Saturday dinner at Orem? Cynthia chimed in. The whole restaurant saw them. There are even photos. Raymond pushed a file of printed images to the center of the table. In them, June was seen standing, face cold. Owen remained seated, hands pressed against the table like a man who had made a mistake. The issue isn't whether they're dating. Raymond continued. It's that she's disrupting the company. Marcus crossed his arms. What do you mean by that? She's not like the others. She's too good, to the point it unsettles people. The professional interpreters are irritated. HR doesn't know how to manage her. And we, Raymond, looked around. We don't even know who she really is. You're right, Cynthia nodded. I checked her background. There's a 2-year gap in her history, unexplained. And if there is something between her and Owen, Raymond lowered his voice. We're at risk. Favoritism, governance issues, even potential harassment lawsuits. Marcus stayed silent. We need to act, Cynthia concluded. Quietly, no drama, no personal reasons, just restructuring. Terminate her freelance contract, Raymond agreed, and disband the internal translation unit under the pretense of streamlining. What about Owen? Marcus asked. No need to inform him, Cynthia replied. He'll find out after. Thursday, 4:45 p.m. June was gathering her documents after a meeting with a Japanese client when a familiar voice called from the doorway. Ms. Delgado. June turned. Cynthia Blair was standing there, holding a large envelope. May I speak with you for a moment? June put down her pen and nodded. They stepped into a small meeting room. Cynthia wore the kind of smile perfected by someone used to delivering bad news. The company is undergoing structural adjustments, she began. We'll be outsourcing most translation services moving forward. You mean I'm no longer needed? June asked, her voice steady. It's not about capability, Cynthia quickly added. You're excellent, but we're restructuring. And as you know, your role was never official. So the company has decided to terminate my contract. June finished for her. We'll settle any remaining compensation. The envelope contains the termination letter and final payment. June took the envelope and skimmed it. Each line colder than the air from a jet engine. No, thank you. No recognition. Just contractual clauses. She folded it and tucked it into her bag. Understood. Do you have any questions? June looked at her for a long moment. No, she said. I'm used to being pushed out without being asked anything. Friday, 10:15 a.m. Owen walked into the administration office to sign off on payroll, only to see June Delgado's name on a termination list. Hold on, he barked. Who authorized this? Marcia looked up, startled. What's wrong? She was terminated. Since when? Yesterday afternoon. HR processed it. Owen stood frozen for a few seconds, then turned sharply and marched toward the 35th floor boardroom like a man preparing to wake up a sleeping system. Explain yourselves, Owen demanded, standing in the center of the room. The trio was already seated. Ms. Delgado Raymond began calmly, was simply an administrative adjustment. No adjustment gets made without my approval. Owen growled. She wasn't an official employee. We had the authority, Cynthia said, her tone unwavering. You did this because she's better than the people you've hired for 3 years? Or because she slapped me in a restaurant? She's a liability, Raymond said. To our image, to internal dynamics, to leadership perception. Owen looked at each of them. You fired a woman who worked for the United Nations, speaks 5 languages, and saved this company from losing a major contract because she didn't fit in. We're protecting the company. Marcus finally spoke. Owen gave a dry, bitter laugh. By cutting out the one thing that still made this place feel human. He turned and walked out. He didn't say another word. But in his eyes, which none of them dared to meet, was fire. Not the fire of anger, but the fire of disillusionment. And that was far more dangerous. Owen Mercer stood in front of apartment 11B in Pilsen, a place he had once come to, only to quietly walk away. This time, he didn't leave. He rang the doorbell. No answer, he rang again. Then a third time. Finally, the door cracked open. A girl appeared, thin, messy hair, wearing an oversized hoodie. Who are you looking for? I'm looking for your mom, June. She looked at him like she was scanning someone who didn't belong to her world. My mom doesn't take visitors. I'm her friend, Owen said, then added hesitantly, she once saved my company. The girl didn't reply, but her gaze softened. Wait here. A moment later, June stepped out, wearing an old sweater, face exhausted like she hadn't slept in a week. What are you doing here? She asked bluntly. To say I'm sorry and to hear the rest of the story. June studied him for a moment. Some stories aren't meant to be told, but some people deserve to know them, Owen replied gently. Silence. Then June stepped back inside. Come in, I'll make some tea. The apartment was small, worn, but spotless. A low bookshelf, a few watercolor paintings by Raphael, and a ukulele by the window. They sat across from each other. Steam curled from the tea. You were fired, Owen said first. I know it was unfair, and I know I helped make it happen. June said nothing. I also know you used to work for the United Nations, studied at Monterey. Were one of the best in your field. You investigated me? No. I tried to understand you. And what angered me most was realizing you never hid anything. You just stayed silent. A faint smile touched her lips. Sometimes silence is the only way to survive. Owen clenched his hands. Tell me, what happened? June was quiet for a long moment. Then she began. 2018. I was sent to interpret at a humanitarian aid summit in Africa. Among hundreds of briefing notes, I found over 20 contracts that were actually money laundering fronts, aid funds funneled to shell companies and redirected to international officials. She paused and looked at Owen. He said nothing, just listened. I gathered evidence, reported it to superiors. At first, they told me to stay quiet, to protect the system. Then I was reassigned. Set up, accused of mistranslating a contract I never touched. And eventually, I was fired for breach of confidentiality. Owen exhaled. You were punished for telling the truth. That wasn't all, she added, voice tightening. I was threatened. Someone left a white envelope outside my door with a photo of Raphael as a toddler. No words needed. I understood the message. Owen flinched. You didn't go to the police and say what? That I'm a janitor who used to work for the UN, now living in Pilsen, and the only thing that matters to me is my child. They'd laugh. The room went silent. Only the ticking clock could be heard. I left everything, changed numbers, moved homes, buried my degrees in a cardboard box. I became June Delgado, the woman who mopped airport lobbies, translated in her head while pushing a broom, and only spoke when it truly mattered. She looked up, and then you showed up. With a ridiculous Catalan translation error. Owen chuckled dryly. Right. And now I've lost everything again, she added. No bitterness. Just a plain truth. Owen nodded, eyes burning with resolve. Not this time. What do you mean? I'm bringing you back. In what role? With the title you deserve. Not a cleaner. Not a freelancer. But as Director of International Relations at Avalon Air. June's eyes widened. You're insane. No, I let them push you out in the most cowardly way possible. Now I need to make it right, not with words, but with action. She stared at him, long and hard. They'll tear you apart in the boardroom. Maybe, Owen smiled. But at least this time, I won't stay silent. As Owen left, Raphael ran out to see him off. You were my mom's old boss, right? Right, Owen said, ruffling the boy's hair. And I made a mistake. Can you fix it? Raphael asked seriously. Owen crouched down and looked him in the eye. I'll try, but promise me something. What is it? Mom is just a janitor. Your mom is a hero. Raphael nodded. I know. Avalon Air, headquarters, Monday. 9 a.m. The quarterly board meeting convened with all executive officers, senior advisors, and major shareholder representatives present. Every chair in the room was worth millions, not because of the material it was made of, but because of who got to sit in it. Owen Mercer sat at the head of the table. In front of him was a large screen, ready to present the cue for strategy deck. But instead of opening with figures, he looked directly at the 12 expectant faces before him. I'm not going to talk about finances today. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. I'm here to correct a mistake, not a miscalculation. A wrongdoing. Raymond Shaw, the CFO, frowned. What are you talking about, Owen? I'm talking about a decision made behind my back, wrapped neatly in the phrase internal restructuring. Cynthia Blair blinked. We did report you fired her without my input. Was she not an official employee? Sure, but only because you never gave her a legitimate title to protect her. Marcus Liu, the coup, furrowed his brow. Owen, she was just an interpreter. Talented, but replaceable. No, she wasn't. Owen stood, voice steely. Her name is June Delgado. Former senior interpreter at the United Nations. Masters in linguistics and diplomacy. She interpreted at a NATO summit. And she had the courage to blow the whistle on international aid fraud, knowing the cost would be her career and her child's safety. The room went still. She didn't lack documentation. She wasn't a mystery. She was forced to live like a shadow because she dared to speak the truth. Owen took a deep breath. And now, once again, you've silenced someone like her, because she doesn't look like us. Because she was once a janitor. Because she doesn't wear designer suits or sip imported wine. A shareholder director. interjected, "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment." "No," Owen replied, eyes blazing. "Logic told me to stay quiet." But it's exactly because too many people have stayed logical that someone like Snail has had to hide in silence for 7 years. That ends now. He pulled out a file and laid it on the table. "This is my official proposal. Appoint June Delgado as Director of Global Language and Cultural Relations. Establish a new Department of Inclusion and Communication. Reporting directly to the CEO. Issue a formal apology for her termination, which was conducted outside legal procedure." Raymond bristled. "You think the board will approve this?" "I don't need your approval," Owen said calmly. "I'm the CEO. I have the authority to restructure departments. And if any of you can't work alongside a woman who saved you from losing a €3 million contract, there's the door. It stays open all day." Heavy silence followed. No one moved. 2 days later, on the 10th floor, once a space where June had been overlooked like a shadow, now hung a new sign. Department of Global Relations and Language CRVs. Owen stood nearby, smiling as June walked in for the first time. Wearing a nameplate that read, "June Delgado." Director Shea looked at him, slightly hesitant. "You really did it," she said quietly. "Not enough," Owen replied with a smile. "I still owe you one more thing." "What's that?" He handed her a small envelope, a keynote speaker invitation. "Global Multicultural Aviation Summit. I nominated you." They said yes. June opened it. It's an embossed card, her name printed boldly. Her hands trembled slightly. "You don't have to speak unless you're ready," Owen said gently. June closed the invitation, lifted her head. "I'm ready, not because I've forgiven the past, but because I refuse to let it dictate the sound of my voice anymore." Owen nodded. She turned and walked out. The door closed behind her, but this time it was a door opening to what lay ahead. International Conference Hall, Geneva, Switzerland. The Global Aviation Multilingual and Communication Summit, a live-streamed event gathering hundreds of representatives from airlines, government agencies, and academia worldwide. June Delgado sat in the front row near the stage, wearing a navy blazer and crisp white shirt. Her hair was neatly pinned, hands clasped together on her lap. Owen stood beside her and whispered, "You okay?" "My throat's as dry as the Sahara terminal." She replied with a faint smile. "You interpreted for NATO. This is just a crowded room. That was different. Back then, I was behind the curtain. Now I'm walking out onto the stage." Owen nodded. "But you're not walking alone." When the moderator read her name, the room fell silent. A few whispers stirred, trying to recall who June Delgado was. She stepped onto the stage. Cameras followed her. On the screen behind her, bold letters appeared. June Delgado, Director of Global Language and Inclusion. Avalon Air. June took a deep breath, lifted the microphone, and spoke. Her voice didn't shake. It was steady, low, and clear. 7 years ago, I stood behind headsets, translating every word, every nuance, every thread-thin boundary between understanding and misunderstanding. But today, I'm not here as an interpreter. I'm here as someone who once stayed silent. The room hushed even deeper, in a world where language is used as power. I learned that silence can be a choice, but often it's the choice of the powerless. I was pushed out of diplomacy for speaking a truth no one wanted to hear. I worked in the shadows with a mop, watching billion-dollar contracts being signed by people who couldn't read the language they were signing. And for a while, I believed I would remain silent forever. She paused, looked toward the audience, and that's when she saw him. Third row, right side of the stage. Red tie, rimless glasses, still wearing that faint, familiar smirk. Charles B. Lennox, former humanitarian policy advisor, the highest-ranking official linked to the aid laundering scandal she exposed. 7 years ago, the same man who had someone follow her son. Her fingers clenched around the microphone. Her chest tightened. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She stepped back slightly. Owen rose from his seat, eyes tracing hers, and froze when he saw the face. Lennox smiled, gave a faint, polite nod, as if the past, the one that took her job. Her piece, her voice, was a forgivable misunderstanding. The moderator glanced at June, concern flickering across her face. The cameras were still rolling live. June closed her eyes for 3 seconds, then opened them and spoke. But I am no longer silent. Because every time I speak, I don't just speak for myself. I speak for the janitor who knows 5 languages. For the woman labeled a PR risk. For those erased from group photos because their clothes didn't match the dress code. And for my son, who once asked me, "Mom, why do good people have to hide?" The room remained still, but it was no longer cold. June turned her head and looked straight at him. Because today, I'm here, on this stage, without needing anyone's permission. Owen clapped. The person next to him stood. Then the entire room rose. Applause crashed like a tidal wave, breaking through the years of silence that had buried her. Lennox stayed seated, still smiling. But this time, it held no power. After the talk, Owen rushed to the stage. You did it." June exhaled, cold sweat trickling down her neck. "I think I just signed a death sentence for several international relationships." "That's okay," Owen grinned. "You've got me, and Avalon Air." June stayed quiet for a moment, then looked at him. "I want to bring this into the light. For real? You're not alone anymore, June. This time we take it all the way." *1. Year later, Houston East Suburban District. A newly repainted, 3-story red brick building. Etched into the sign by the gate was a simple but powerful inscription. The Voice House, a place for those who once had to stay silent. A language and community inclusion center. Founded by June Delgado and Owen Mercer. Built for immigrant women, laborers, bilingual children, and anyone who had ever had to hide their voice just to survive in the main hall. Small classrooms were buzzing. In one corner, a group of elders learned English through music. In another, young mothers studied Spanish with babies cradled in their arms. And in the largest room on the 2nd floor, June stood at the whiteboard, teaching the nuances between translation and interpretation. She wore a white blouse, her hair tied low, slim-framed glasses resting on her nose. In the corner of the room, Raphael, now 11, was sketching with other children. He was growing fast, bright, gentle, and full of quiet strength, just like his mother. After class, shy 19-year-old girl with sun-kissed skin and a soft Mexican accent approached. "Ms. Delgado, if I never go to college, can I still become an interpreter?" June smiled. "Do you have a heart that listens?" The girl nodded. Double quotes. "Do you have eyes that notice?" Another nod. "And do you have enough courage to speak the truth even when no one wants to hear it?" This time, the girl hesitated, then nodded firmly. June placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then you'll be an interpreter. The rest we'll teach you here." On the top floor, in the corner office, Owen sat by the window, signing off on scholarship, program paperwork. He was no longer the CEO of Avalon Air. He had resigned 8 months earlier, voluntarily. With no scandal, no bitterness. "I know. Longer want to run an airline," he said in his final press conference. "I want to run a place where people's voices aren't filtered by job titles or income brackets." He donated all his shares to a nonprofit investment trust, and moved near Pilsen, the place he once called out of sight. How he called it home, late afternoon. Sunlight poured through the main hall's windows. June, Owen, and Raphael cleaned up after a community event. Cookies, tea, and a few small guitars left scattered on the tables. Raphael beamed. I got invited to a bilingual summer camp. They chose me to be the MC for the opening ceremony. Owen laughed, high-fiving him. Looks like someone's following in his mother's footsteps. June playfully rolled her eyes. If this kid won't stop talking, it's on you. They all laughed together. Outside, a young woman walked in. She wore hospital scrubs, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She stopped in front of the sign, studying it intently. Then turned and asked, "Excuse me, do you accept students who only speak one language?" June stepped forward, gently. "Here, we don't ask how many languages you know. We only ask if you want to listen and if you want to speak in your own voice." The woman nodded, eyes misting. "Then I'd like to sign up." Owen smiled, nudging Raphael. "Another one who refuses to whisper." Evening June sat writing in her journal. Fresh page. Neat handwriting. 1 year ago, I was fired without explanation. 1 year ago, I stepped onto a stage with hands still shaking from a past that hadn't. Rested today, I taught 43 people how to say their names aloud clearly. Today, I watched my son speak to an elderly Cambodian man in broken English and a beautiful smile. Today, I lived. She closed the journal, poured herself a cup of tea. From the third-floor balcony, the streetlight's golden glow shimmered on. The sign below, the Voice House, A. Home without keys, because those who once had their voices locked away had finally found a way to speak on their own terms. You're still here, aren't you? Thank you for staying with us through the very end of this story. Here on Snail Story. From an airport hallway, a mop in hand, to an international stage and a nameplate that reads Director June's journey wasn't just about fate turning. Around, it was a quiet reminder. Some people were once forced into silence, but when they finally speak, the world has no choice but to listen. Today's story wasn't only about injustice or redemption. It was about healing, when a woman dares to stand up for the truth, when a child realizes his mother is a hero, and when someone once seated in a boardroom chooses to listen, not command. If something lingered with you after this journey, maybe a bit of courage, a quiet reassurance, or just a moment of warmth, then the Voice House isn't just a place in this story. It might be something inside of you, too. So tell us, how would you rate this story on the emotional scale? If you enjoy gentle journeys that still leave a lasting impact, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Who knows? The next story might be exactly what you need, right when you need it. We'll see you again in another quiet, heartfelt journey. Still slow, still full of love.